Apache woman's cry. They hang me for my tribe's land. Rancher risks everything to save the girl. The sun was already sinking behind the dry hills when the rancher finished his work for the day. The land around him stretched wide and quiet, covered in dust, thorny bushes, and old fence lines that had stood for decades. This place had been his home for many years. Life here was simple. Wake up early, tend the animals, fix what was broken, and sleep when the stars filled the sky. He did not talk much to people in town. He trusted the land more than he trusted men. That evening felt different from the start. The air was heavy, and the wind carried a strange tension, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. As the rancher locked the barn and turned toward his house, he stopped suddenly. A sound floated through the open land. At first he thought it was the wind passing through rocks or trees, but then he heard it again. It was not the wind, it was a cry. The sound was weak but sharp enough to cut through the silence. It was the voice of a woman, filled with pain and fear. The rancher stood still, listening closely. The cry came again, quieter this time, like someone running out of strength. His heart began to pound. No one wandered this land at night, and no one cried out here unless something was terribly wrong. Without thinking much more, he grabbed his flashlight and moved toward the sound. His boots kicked up dust as he walked past broken shrubs and dry ground. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became. It was coming from near an old tree not far from the edge of his property. That tree had been there long before he was born. Many storms had passed over it, yet it still stood. When the beam of his flashlight reached the tree, the rancher froze. A young woman lay on the ground beneath it. Her body was twisted, her clothes torn and dirty. A rope lay nearby, half buried in the dust. Her wrists were marked, and around her neck was a dark line that made his stomach tighten. She was barely moving. Each breath she took looked like it might be her last. The rancher rushed to her side and knelt down. He spoke softly, trying not to scare her. Her eyes opened slightly. They were filled with fear, pain, and something deeper, betrayal. She tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. He quickly offered her water from the bottle he carried. She drank slowly, her hands shaking. When she finally found her voice, it came out as a whisper. She told him her name belonged to the Apache people. Her words were simple but heavy. She said they tried to end her life. She said it was because of land, her tribe's land. The rancher felt anger rise inside him. He had lived long enough to know how the world worked. Money spoke louder than truth. Power crushed those who stood in its way. But seeing it like this in front of him was different. This was not a story from the news or a rumor from town. This was a human being, nearly destroyed for refusing to give up what was rightfully hers. He gently lifted her and carried her toward his house. She was light, too light, as if hunger and fear had already taken much from her. He laid her on his couch and cleaned her wounds as best he could. He worked carefully, like he did with injured animals, knowing that rough hands could do more harm than good. As he worked, she drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes she mumbled words he could not fully understand. Sometimes she cried softly, tears sliding down her face even while she slept. The rancher felt a weight settle on his chest. He knew that once he helped her, there was no turning back. Whoever had done this would not stop easily. Outside, the night grew darker. Coyotes howled in the distance, but even they sounded uneasy. The rancher sat at the table watching her breathe, listening to the old clock tick on the wall. His mind raced. If he reported this, would anyone listen? If he stayed silent, would she survive? And if he protected her, how far would the danger follow him? Before dawn, she woke again. This time her voice was steadier. She told him more. She explained that her tribe had lived on their land for generations. The land was not just soil to them. It held their history, their ancestors, their stories. But powerful people wanted it. They wanted to build, to profit, to erase what stood in their way. When she refused to sign papers that would take the land, trouble began. False accusations, pressure from officials, people who smiled during the day and threatened her at night. She tried to fight through legal ways, believing the truth would protect her. Instead, it made her a target. One night they came for her. They covered their faces and dragged her away. No witnesses, no mercy. She remembered the rope, the cold ground, and the belief that her life was about to end. She remembered thinking of her people and hoping someone would remember the truth if she did not survive. The rancher listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened with every word. He had seen unfairness before, but this was cruelty mixed with greed. He looked at the land outside his window. He knew how deeply land could be loved. He also knew how easily it could be taken by force and lies. When the sun finally rose, the desert light filled the room. The woman looked smaller in the daylight, but there was strength in her eyes now. She had survived, and survival carried responsibility. She asked him quietly if he would send her away. She said she did not want to bring trouble to his door. The rancher did not answer right away. He walked outside, letting the morning air hit his face. He looked across his ranch, the fences, the animals, the land he had protected all his life. Then he thought of the rope under the tree. He went back inside and told her she could stay. He said no one deserved to be hunted for speaking the truth. He said if people wanted to bring trouble, they would have to come through him first. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from fear. They were from relief. As the day moved on, the rancher noticed unfamiliar trucks passing by the dirt road near his property. He felt eyes watching from a distance. Word traveled fast in small places. He knew that someone out there was already looking for her. That night, as the stars returned to the sky, the rancher sat awake, holding his old rifle nearby, not for violence but for protection. The Apache woman slept in the next room, safe for now. The land outside was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt peaceful. Something had changed. A cry in the desert had pulled two lives together. One was running from injustice. The other was about to stand directly in its path, and neither of them yet understood how much this choice would cost. If you want, I can now expand part 2 in the same style and length, keeping it engaging and safe. Just tell me to continue. Morning came slowly over the ranch, but peace did not come with it. The sun rose as it always did, lighting the dry land with soft gold, yet the air felt tense. The rancher woke early, as usual, but his thoughts were not on animals or fences. They were on the young woman sleeping in the next room and the danger that followed her like a shadow. He checked on her quietly. She was awake, sitting up, holding a cup of warm water in both hands. Her movements were careful, as if her body still remembered pain. When she saw him, she nodded in thanks. Words felt heavy between them, so they spoke only a little. Still, trust was slowly forming, not from promises but from actions. He made simple food for her and left it nearby, giving her space. He understood that healing did not happen quickly, especially after fear like hers. Outside, he worked as he always did, but his eyes kept moving toward the road. Every sound felt louder. Every passing engine felt closer than it should. Later that morning, a truck slowed near his fence line. Two men inside looked around before driving on. The rancher's jaw tightened. He knew that look. It was not the look of someone lost. It was the look of someone searching. When he went back inside, the woman was standing near the window, watching the same road. She did not say anything, but he could see fear return to her eyes. He told her gently that she was safe for now, but he also did not lie. He said things might get harder before they got better. She nodded. She said she had expected that. Fear had been part of her life for a long time now. As the day went on, she began to talk more. Not all at once, and not in order, but in pieces, like broken memories slowly fitting together. She told him about her childhood on the land her tribe called home. She spoke of open skies, songs shared by elders, and stories passed down beside small fires. That land was not owned by paper to her people. It was held by memory, by duty, and by respect. When outsiders came with offers, many listened. The money promised was more than most families had ever seen. Some felt tired of fighting and wanted easier lives. But she could not agree. She had studied the law, learned how rights worked, and believed that truth would protect them. She stood up in meetings, spoke clearly, and refused to sign away land that did not belong to any single person. That was when the pressure started. Letters came first, then visits, officials who smiled but spoke with warning in their voices. They told her she was causing trouble. They said she was standing in the way of progress. When she still refused, the tone changed. Accusations followed. Papers claimed she had broken rules she had never touched. People she trusted stopped answering her calls. She told the rancher that the worst part was not the threats, it was the silence. When people looked away, pretending not to see what was happening. That silence made her feel smaller than any threat ever could. The rancher listened, his hands clenched. He had lived long enough to see how systems could turn against those without power, but hearing it from her made it real in a way that angered him deeply. He thought of how easily her voice could have been lost forever if the desert had not carried her cry to him. In the afternoon, he drove into town for supplies. He left her hidden inside the house and told her not to go near the windows. In town, things felt different than before. Conversations stopped when he entered a store. A few people nodded, but most avoided his eyes. He could feel questions hanging in the air. At the counter, a man he had known for years leaned closer and spoke quietly. He warned the rancher to stay out of matters that did not concern him. He said powerful people were involved, and that helping the wrong person could cost him everything. The rancher thanked him for the warning but did not promise anything. When he returned to the ranch, he found fresh tire marks near his gate. They had not been there before. He followed them with his eyes until they disappeared into the distance. Someone had come close, too close. That evening, he and the woman sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The lamp between them cast long shadows on the walls. She looked tired but determined. She asked him why he was helping her. She said he owed her nothing and that danger followed her wherever she went. He thought for a long moment before answering. He said that land had given him everything he had. It had fed him, sheltered him, and taught him patience. Taking land through fear was wrong. Letting it happen when you could stop it was worse. She lowered her eyes, holding back emotion. She said many people had heard her story before, but few had believed her. Fewer still had been willing to stand beside her. Hearing his words felt like being seen again. As night fell, the sounds around the ranch changed. A vehicle passed slowly along the road, its lights off. The rancher turned off his own lights and watched from the darkness. The truck did not stop, but the message was clear. They knew where she was. The woman's breathing became shallow. Old fear returned quickly. The rancher reminded her that she was not alone anymore. He checked the doors and windows and stayed awake long into the night. Sleep did not come easily. In the quiet hours, she spoke again. She said she did not want revenge. She did not want anyone harmed. All she wanted was for the truth to be heard and for her people to live without fear. She worried that bringing the fight to the rancher's door would destroy his life. He answered calmly. He said injustice grew when good people stayed silent. He had been silent long enough. By morning, both of them knew that hiding would not solve anything. The danger would only grow. They needed a plan, one based on truth and careful steps. The woman mentioned documents, records, and witnesses that could prove the land belonged to her tribe. Some were hidden, some copied, some held by people still too afraid to speak openly. The rancher said he would help her gather them. He knew it would take time and courage. He also knew that once they started, there would be no safe way back. Outside, the desert looked calm again, but calm no longer meant safety. The land had chosen sides, and so had they. What began as a rescue was turning into a stand. And both of them could feel that the hardest days were still ahead. The next few days passed with a strange mix of calm and tension. On the surface, life at the ranch continued as usual. The animals needed care, fences needed checking, and food needed to be prepared. But beneath every simple task was the awareness that danger was close. It felt like a storm gathering far away, not yet visible, but heavy in the air. The young Apache woman began to regain some strength. Her movements were still slow, and pain sometimes crossed her face, but her eyes were clearer now. Fear had not left her, but it no longer controlled her completely. Each morning, she helped where she could, washing dishes or sweeping the small house. These small actions gave her a sense of purpose and reminded her that she was still capable, still alive. The rancher noticed how careful she was, always listening, always alert. She jumped at sudden sounds and avoided windows without thinking. He understood that healing the body was easier than healing the mind. He did not push her to talk, but when she chose to speak, he listened fully. They began to plan quietly, not with big words or bold promises, but with simple steps. She told him about records kept by her tribe, old maps, letters, and agreements that showed their long connection to the land. Some documents were stored with elders. Others had been copied and hidden after threats began. A few people outside the tribe had also seen proof, but were afraid to step forward. The rancher offered to help reach those people. He knew the area, the back roads, and the way rumors moved through small towns. He also knew that asking questions would draw attention. Every move had to be careful. One afternoon, as they spoke in low voices, a cloud of dust appeared on the road. A car approached and stopped near the gate. Two men stepped out. They did not call out or wave. They simply stood there, looking around as if inspecting the land. The rancher walked out to meet them, keeping his voice steady. They asked casual questions. Had he seen a woman passing through? Had anyone unusual come by? Their words were polite, but their eyes were not. The rancher answered calmly, saying he had seen no one. After a moment they left, but not before one of them looked directly at the house. When the rancher returned inside, the woman was pale. She asked if they would come back. He did not lie. He said it was possible. She took a deep breath and said then they had no time to waste. That night the rancher drove her to meet someone she trusted. They took long, winding roads, avoiding main paths. The meeting place was an old building far from town. An elder from her tribe waited there, his face lined with age and worry. When he saw her alive, his eyes filled with emotion. They spoke for hours. The elder shared stories of pressure placed on the tribe, of promises broken, and of fear spreading among families. He handed over copies of records, wrapped carefully to protect them. These papers were not just proof. They were history, memory, and identity. As they drove back, the woman held the documents tightly. She said these papers were the reason people wanted her silent. The rancher nodded. Truth often frightened those who depended on lies. The following days became harder. The rancher found his fence cut in one place. One of his animals was injured, not badly, but enough to send a message. At night, headlights appeared on the road and stopped briefly before moving on. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear. The woman struggled with guilt. She told the rancher that she had never wanted anyone else to suffer because of her fight. She offered to leave, to disappear somewhere far away. The rancher refused. He said leaving would only reward those who used fear as a weapon. Standing together was their strength now. They began reaching out to others quietly. Some refused to talk. Some listened but asked for time. A few agreed to help, moved by the courage it took for her to survive and continue speaking. Each person who stepped forward added a small light to a very dark situation. Still, the pressure grew. One morning, the rancher received a formal notice claiming he was involved in illegal activity. The accusation was vague, but the threat was clear. His land, his livelihood, and his freedom were being targeted. He read the paper slowly, then folded it and set it aside. The woman watched him closely, waiting for anger or regret. Instead, he looked calm. He said this was expected. He also said that if they were being threatened, it meant the truth was working. At night, they talked about fear. She admitted she was terrified of being taken again. Some nights sleep did not come at all. Memories returned without warning, bringing tightness to her chest and tears she could not stop. The rancher did not pretend to understand her pain fully, but he stayed nearby, steady and present. Sometimes that was enough. She also spoke about her tribe's future. She worried that even if the land was protected, the damage done by fear would last for generations. Children had seen their parents afraid. Elders had been disrespected. Trust had been shaken. She wanted more than a legal victory. She wanted healing. The rancher said healing often started with one brave act. He believed her voice could help others find their own again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they organized the documents and notes they had gathered. The table was covered with papers, names, and dates. It felt overwhelming but also powerful. Each piece added weight to their case. The woman looked at the rancher and said she was ready to speak publicly if needed. The thought scared her, but hiding scared her more now. The rancher warned her that once she stepped into the open, the pressure would increase. She nodded. She said she had already faced the worst. Outside, the land was quiet again. The same land people wanted to take. The same land that had nearly cost her life. The rancher looked out at it and felt a deep sense of responsibility. This was no longer just her fight. It was his too. As they prepared for the next steps, both of them understood that the line had been crossed. There was no safe middle ground anymore. Silence was no longer an option. What began as an act of kindness had turned into a test of courage, and though fear still walked beside them, it no longer led the way. The day they had been preparing for finally arrived, though it did not feel like a victory at first. It felt heavy, slow, and filled with quiet fear. The morning air was cool, and the sky was pale, as if even the sun was unsure how the day would end. The rancher woke before dawn and sat at the table, staring at the papers spread neatly in front of him. Each page carried weight. Each page carried risk. The Apache woman stood near the window, watching the light grow outside. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady by pressing them together. Today, she would no longer be hidden. Today, she would speak openly, knowing that many eyes would be on her. Some would listen with respect. Others would watch with anger, but her voice would no longer be silent. They drove toward town together in the early morning hours. The road felt longer than usual. Every passing vehicle made her heart race. Every sound reminded her of the night she had been dragged away. She took slow breaths, reminding herself that she was not alone now. The rancher was beside her, steady and focused, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. When they arrived, the building already felt crowded. People stood outside, talking in low voices. Some recognized the rancher and looked surprised to see him there. Others looked at the woman with curiosity, then quickly looked away. She felt the familiar weight of being judged without being known. Inside, the room was quiet but tense. The walls felt too close. She could sense the presence of those who wished she had never survived. She could feel their attention like pressure on her back. The rancher placed the documents on the table carefully, as if laying down something fragile and valuable. When proceedings began, voices filled the room, calm on the surface but sharp underneath. Statements were made that painted her as difficult, uncooperative, and unreasonable. The words felt cold and unfair. She clenched her hands and reminded herself why she was there. She was not here to be liked. She was here to tell the truth. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she did not sit back down. The room seemed to grow quieter as she began. Her voice shook at first, but she continued. She spoke of her tribe's history on the land, of generations who had lived, worked, and been buried there. She spoke of meetings, pressure, and fear. She spoke of refusing to sign away what did not belong to any one person. Then she spoke of the night they came for her. She did not use dramatic words. She did not exaggerate. She simply described what happened step by step as clearly as she could. The silence in the room deepened. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others stared at the floor. She felt tears gather, but she did not stop speaking. Her voice grew stronger as she went on, not because the memory hurt less, but because she refused to let it break her again. When she finished, she sat down slowly, her chest tight, her hands cold. The rancher watched her with quiet respect. He knew how much it had cost her to speak. Then he stood. He spoke simply, without anger or blame. He told the room how he had found her, barely alive, left to disappear. He spoke of the land he had known all his life and how he understood its value beyond money. He explained why he chose to help her, knowing the risks. He did not present himself as a hero. He presented himself as a man who could not look away. The documents were reviewed one by one. Old maps, written agreements, records that showed long-standing connection and legal standing. The truth did not shout. It waited patiently, solid and clear. Those who opposed them tried to question the details. They tried to cast doubt, to confuse timelines and intentions, but the facts held firm. Each attempt to twist the story only revealed more cracks in their position. Hours passed. The room grew warm. People grew tired, but no one left. Everyone could feel that something important was happening. This was more than a dispute over land. It was a test of whether truth could still be heard when power tried to silence it. During a short break, the woman stepped outside for air. The rancher followed. She leaned against the wall, her eyes closed, her breathing uneven. She admitted she was afraid of what would happen next, no matter the outcome. Speaking had freed her voice, but it had also made her visible again. The rancher told her she had already done something brave. He said the outcome no longer defined her worth. She nodded slowly, letting his words settle. When they returned inside, the mood had shifted. The arguments against them felt weaker now, less certain. Some faces showed concern instead of confidence. The truth had changed the balance. As the day came to an end, no final decision was announced. Instead, further review was ordered. It was not a clear victory, but it was not a loss. It was a pause, and sometimes a pause was enough to change direction. Outside, the sky was turning orange as the sun began to set. The woman and the rancher stood together, exhausted but steady. She asked him quietly if he regretted getting involved. He looked at the sky and then at her. He said no. He said some things were worth standing for, even when the ground shook beneath your feet. On the drive back, neither spoke much. Words felt unnecessary. The weight of the day sat between them, heavy but honest. They knew the pressure would not disappear overnight. There would be more questions, more resistance, and more waiting. Back at the ranch, the familiar quiet greeted them. The land stretched out calmly, unchanged by human conflict. The woman stepped outside and looked around. This land was different from her own, yet it felt safe. It felt like a place where truth had room to breathe. That night, sleep came slowly. Memories returned, but they did not hold the same power as before. She had spoken. She had been heard. Whatever came next, she would not face it in silence. The rancher lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the night. He knew the cost of the path he had chosen was not yet fully paid, but he also knew that turning back was no longer possible. The truth was out now. And once truth steps into the light, it cannot be easily pushed back into the dark. The days after the hearing moved slowly, as if time itself needed space to think. Nothing was decided right away, and that waiting was its own kind of wait. Every morning, the Apache woman woke with a mix of hope and fear. Every night, the rancher locked the doors and listened to the quiet, wondering what the next day might bring. Life at the ranch returned to a routine, but it was a changed routine. The woman spent time outside now, sitting in the open air, letting the sun touch her face. The land helped her heal in small ways. The wide sky reminded her that the world was bigger than fear. Sometimes she spoke softly to herself in her native language, words meant for strength and memory. The rancher continued his work, though it felt different now. Neighbors who once greeted him warmly now kept their distance. A few old friends stopped calling. Supplies took longer to arrive. Simple tasks came with extra difficulty. He noticed these changes but did not complain. He had made his choice, and he stood by it. Letters began to arrive from different places. Some were official and careful with their words. Others were quiet messages of support from people who had watched from a distance and finally found the courage to speak. A few members of the woman's tribe reached out, thanking the rancher for protecting one of their own. Their gratitude was simple but deep. One afternoon, the woman received a call that made her hands shake. The review was complete. The documents had been accepted. The claims against her were found to have no truth behind them. Most importantly, the land was placed under protection. It could not be taken or changed without full agreement from her tribe. For a long moment she could not speak. The words felt unreal, like something from a dream. Then tears came, slow and quiet. Not tears of pain this time, but of release. A burden she had carried for so long was finally lifting. The rancher watched her carefully, waiting to be sure before he smiled. When she told him, he closed his eyes and let out a long breath he did not realize he had been holding. They did not celebrate loudly. There was no cheering or excitement. Instead, there was a deep sense of calm, like the land itself had settled. The victory was not perfect. Some of the people responsible faced consequences, but not all. Some walked away untouched. Justice, they learned, did not always arrive complete, but the truth had been recorded. The land was safe, and her voice had changed the outcome. News spread quickly. Some people who had doubted her now spoke differently. Others remained silent, unwilling to admit they had been wrong. The woman did not seek apologies. She had learned that peace did not require agreement from everyone. Members of her tribe came to visit the ranch. Elders shook the rancher's hand and thanked him with sincerity. They spoke of history, of loss, and of survival. They invited him to visit their land someday to see what he had helped protect. He accepted quietly, humbled by the offer. As weeks passed, the woman began to plan her return home. She was stronger now, both in body and spirit. The fear that once controlled her had softened into caution, and caution into wisdom. She knew healing would take time, but she no longer felt broken. On her last evening at the ranch, she and the rancher sat outside, watching the sky turn deep orange and purple. The air was gentle and the land felt peaceful again. She thanked him, not just for saving her life, but for standing beside her when it would have been easier to step away. He told her she had done the hardest part herself. She had spoken when silence was expected. She had stood when fear tried to bend her. He said he only followed where courage led. Before she left the next morning, she placed her hand on the land near the house, a quiet gesture of respect. Then she turned and walked toward her future, carrying both scars and strength with her. After she was gone, the ranch felt emptier but also fuller in a strange way. The rancher returned to his work, though nothing felt quite the same. He had lost some comfort and gained responsibility. He had lost silence and gained purpose. From time to time, he heard updates from the tribe. The land was being cared for. Young people were learning its stories. Elders spoke of the woman who refused to give up, and the rancher who stood beside her. Their names became part of a larger memory. On quiet evenings, the rancher would look out over his land and think about how one moment can change everything. A single cry in the desert had led him down a path he never expected. It cost him ease, but it gave him meaning. The Apache woman, now back among her people, often spoke to others who felt unheard. She told them fear was real, but it did not have to be the end of the story. She reminded them that even when the world feels heavy, truth still has weight. The land remained, strong, patient, witness to both cruelty and courage, and in the end that was the greatest victory of all.